Conventional political analysis describes the state as a single, unified block. We are taught to see government, law, and administrative authority as one solid entity that manages society. The Marxist philosopher Louis Althusser argued that this view is an oversimplification. He sought to analyze the internal components of state power to understand how they actually maintain social order. His thesis posits that the capitalist state functions like an advanced dual-layered operating system. Its primary function is not just to govern, but to reproduce the social and economic conditions required for capitalism to exist. Consider why winning an election fails to grant a party control over the state itself. To observe how a ruling class maintains control while allowing for political opposition, we have to map the structural architecture of the state. Althusser defines the first layer of this system as the Repressive State Apparatus, or RSA. The RSA is a centralized, cohesive body that functions through direct coercion. We see the RSA in action with the deployment of the police, as well as the army, the courts, and the prisons. These institutions function primarily through physical violence, or the threat of it. The second half of the system consists of the Ideological State Apparatuses, or ICEs. Unlike the singular RSA, the ICEs are plural and decentralized. These include schools, churches, media, and trade unions. They do not use physical force. They function by instilling specific ideologies. The state remains stable because the ICEs secure psychological submission on a daily basis. The ruling class only resorts to the violence of the RSA when this ideological control fails to hold. If we zoom in on the political node within the blue ISA web, we find the system of parliamentary democracy. This environment, seen here in the French National Assembly, illustrates the institutional weight of the political ISA. Parliamentary democracy operates under rules dictated by bourgeois ideology, which strictly limit what is considered legally permissible action. Althusser warns against parliamentary cretinism. Parliamentary cretinism is the belief that winning a majority in an election is the same thing as winning a revolution. Winning an election only captures a single node within the ideological state apparatus. It does not grant authority over the rest of the state machinery. Focusing exclusively on the political ISA is a tactical trap. It leaves the state's actual machinery of violence entirely untouched and in the hands of the ruling class. What happens if a party actually threatens the capitalist order from within the parliament? The ruling class will abandon the political ISA and activate the centralized repressive state apparatus to crush the threat. History shows that when the bourgeoisie faces an existential threat, they bypass democracy in favor of Bonapartism. Bonapartism is a form of government where a military leader takes absolute power to stabilize a crisis for the ruling class. This image of the Paris Commune barricades shows the alternative, a direct confrontation with the state's repressive core rather than its political facade. Because the RSA functions as the ultimate failsafe of the system, a political transition that remains within the ISAs cannot bypass the physical power of the repressive state machine. We can see this same containment at work in the trade union ISA. The state initially attempted to eradicate worker organizations through legislation like the 1791 Chapelier Law. The Chapelier Law was a French decree that strictly prohibited all worker associations and strikes. Once unions forced their way into legal existence, the state encased them in an ideological shell. This takes the form of apolitical professional interest. It is the ideology that unions should only care about immediate wages and ignore the broader political struggle. The survival of the ruling class depends on keeping the trade union ISA isolated from the political ISA. Understanding the vulnerability of this system requires looking at the Marxist concept of base and superstructure. The superstructure is the entire dual-layered network of repression and ideology we have mapped so far. Beneath that superstructure is the economic base. This bedrock is defined by the relations of production and the daily reality of exploitation. Althusser clarifies that the system is founded on economic exploitation, not political repression. Repression only exists to guard that exploitation. This is why the trade union struggle is the more direct threat. It connects into the system's true foundation in the economic base. Consider this CGT union banner demanding a €15 minimum wage and a 32-hour week. Many theorists dismiss these as merely quantitative or material demands. These critics often prefer qualitative demands, grand, noble strategies that prioritize political theory over factory floor realities. Althusser argues the opposite. Political action that is not anchored to these mundane economic realities is simply floating in the ideological ether. A political party that abandons the daily economic struggle of the workers eventually becomes just another manager of the capitalist order. The ruling class's actual worst-case scenario is the fusion of the political vanguard with the mass economic struggle of the unions. To achieve mass mobilization, the political struggle must root itself deeply and irreversibly in the economic struggle of the workers. This fusion was the catalyst for the 1917 Russian Revolution, where the political vanguard and the economic base acted as one. This combination of forces creates the structural weight required to target the repressive state apparatus, the system's ultimate failsafe. True revolution requires weaponizing the daily struggles of the economic base to finally shatter the repressive core of the capitalist state.